my co-host, and Joachim, my co-host, and welcome to the Global Tales of Carbon Transition podcast. Welcome back after our summer break. Thank you so much to World Hydrogen Leaders for having us. We're joined today by Marina, a hydrogen regulation specialist. And I must say, as a lawyer myself, this is the talk I'm most excited for this season. Welcome, Marina.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Marina Hritsyshyna, and I work in energy sector.
So, Marina, to start us off, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your own decarbonization journey. How did you end up in hydrogen?
It's a good question. Thank you. I think my journey to the hydrogen sector started in 2011 from my first job in the energy sector, connected with construction wind farms in Ukraine. It was a very exciting job because we constructed the largest wind farm, Baltic wind farm, 200 megawatts. And after almost 7 years working with renewable energy projects, I commenced my work as legal advisor in law firm, Sayenko Harenko in Ukraine. And in this law firm, I decided to analyze and to study gas market in the EU. And was possibility to study in the School of Regulation, Foreign School of Regulation, where on the first course during the COVID, we discussed instead of natural gas market, hydrogen market.
Wow.
And it was just first step, but I still remember this discussion that it's a new way for decarbonization. And so to me, the 2020 is the first year when I started to analyze issues connected with hydrogen. Later in 2021, I had some projects in Ukraine connected with guarantees of origin for hydrogen. But due to the war, I had to relocate in Germany, and in Germany, I started to work in some startups connected with hydrogen sector.
Wow, very interesting story. And just to clarify, when we're speaking about you in the hydrogen sector, we're speaking about more renewable forms of hydrogen and low carbon forms of hydrogen, because I know my co-host Joachim will tell us that hydrogen has been around for a long time and it's not a new technology.
But the word is renewable hydrogen, right?
Yes.
That's the new magic word and world, right?
And I would say we also have now new words like low carbon hydrogen, where we try to unite worlds a bit.
Yeah, and I would say one of the words or acronyms that you can't get away from in the EU is RFMBO, which we'll get to soon. But actually, first I'm wondering, we're here at World Hydrogen Week. I was actually here last year, and I'm interested to hear what your takeaways are so far from what you've heard. What are the buzzwords? What is the hype? What are people saying?
It's an interesting question. I think the main takeaway is that hydrogen sector is process and development in the EU, notwithstanding all challenges that we have. I see a lot of producers of hydrogen, like electrolyzers producers, and it's a very good sign that we have development of clean tech industry in the EU. At the same time, we have interest from other countries like India that also involved in this conference, and it means that the whole world would like to participate in the realization of hydrogen projects in the EU.
Yeah, that's actually something that I found very interesting at this conference. And I was at a talk yesterday in the plenary session, and I heard someone say that the center of gravity for renewable forms of hydrogen and low carbon forms of hydrogen is actually moving more to Asia. Do you think that's perhaps because of the regulatory regime? Is that just perhaps because Asia is a good export, looking to export to the EU? Or perhaps, in your opinion, that's not the case at all, and the EU is still strong and the center of gravity is here?
That's an interesting question about center of gravity. From which perspective we consider this topic? Because if we consider the amount of production of hydrogen, China will be a leader in this field. if I correctly understand. At the same time, in Asia, we have Japan with their own policy, and maybe they have some advantages for some producers. But still, I believe that the EU has also a lot of perspectives in the future due to our strategy for decarbonization. And it seems to me that in any case, we cannot realize all targets without renewable hydrogen.
Wow, Marina, you seem quite a fan of all the European regulation. Some people, when I ask them, like, what do you think, kind of maybe in soccer terms about European regulation, they say we want to give it a yellow card. And you know, in the soccer game, for those of us who watch it less, you know, you give a yellow card, and then after that follows red, and you send somebody off from the field. So apparently, some stakeholders think, "My God, we are so overcomplicating. It's time for green pragmatism." I guess some of this is coming, right, with omnibus regulation, where some things are supposed to go away again. So what's your take on this trend? Where will we end up in, say, 2030 in terms of, well, to use again the word, the RFMBO, which is a renewable fuels of non-biological origin, which is basically the word to say, if you make, energy not out of biomass or bio waste, that in fact, that's how you could be making hydrogen as well, then this hydrogen, RFMBO, renewable hydrogen, there's synonym for that. Where are we with that? Does it still exist? Maybe we just killed it. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, especially for me, because I was a lawyer, and I understand this point from two sides. From one side, from perspective of companies and practical perspective, that it challenges really to realize project. And as a lawyer, and I had experience drafting law, I understand it's quite difficult to realize some targets, policy targets, without certain political instruments in the law. And drafting this mechanism in the law is also very challenging, because it's hard to find this balance between right regulation for reaching these targets and at the same time over-regulation. So for this reason, I understand the European Commission that they have a very challenging task to ramp up market in a very short period of time using policy instruments. And at the same time, it's difficult for market participants to understand all these requirements. So I think that the main option for development of hydrogen sector is a dialogue that we have through associations, through different public consultations, working groups. Only through communication, constant communication, we can reach some results.
Okay, so it still exists, I'm hearing you say, because it's already quite balanced. And
I think we're looking for balance from both sides, from side of European Commission or some regulatory bodies, and from market participants. But the challenge is the main, maybe our targets, because our targets to reach decarbonization, to ramp up this market is too challenging maybe.
I'm going to challenge you in one more way. So let me make it a multi-billion question. So a lot of global hydrogen these days, of the renewable hydrogen, of the RFMBO, may come from countries like India, for example. Yeah? And India still has quite a heavily coal-based grid. And when some of the Indian projects, they do their multi-billion design, and easily sometimes, for example, e-methanol export facility altogether can easily go between $2 and $3 billion investment. So it's quite a bit of money. And when they start aiming for European market, they have to look at and do equivalence with this RFMBO. But if you think about it, the way they make power to make that e-methanol together with hydrogen and biogenic CO2, they will need to use a battery. So the Indian power grid has a big battery, but basically a coal-based battery. Now we have in this European rules, we have this that you have to do things like called hourly correlation, basically like matching between what you're producing, power you're taking is green, power you're using to make hydrogen is green, and it has to be equal hour by hour. If as soon as we apply this rule, which is kind of in there right now, not just kind of, it's in there, 2030 onwards and so, basically all of this beautiful Indian e-methanol is killed for European market. And there aren't, if we kind of start doing maybe monthly balancing and so, which some also want for Europe, then it will come to this market. So what would you advise to European Commission and stakeholders about this? Should we just say no to Indian hydrogen? Because that's what you implicitly just have done by saying, let's keep this beautiful RFMBO balance. Or should we still somehow try to welcome it?
So I think in regulation, we try to find a balance to secure our domestic production, because we have also domestic producers and also importers. And I think it's the main idea of this regulation to support equal rules. I understand your point that in certain countries it's quite challenging to comply with RFMBO, not only in India, in many other countries, many regions. In US, we had also questions about bidding zones. I still think that it is possible maybe to find some flexible approaches for each topic. However, still it's important also to support local producers in the EU, because if we will supply only import of renewable hydrogen, cheap renewable hydrogen, we will not be able to be independent from energy security perspective when we do not have our production, or it will be difficult to develop our internal domestic producers. So I think it's important to combine approaches to support both sides.
But from a legislation point of view, isn't this handled by the CBAM simply?
It's a good question about CBAM, because if we supply renewable hydrogen with certificate RFMBO, it should be excluded from CBAM point questions. Regarding low carbon hydrogen, I think hydrogen should be also imported according to the CBAM regulation. But for renewable, it's not a topic if they have certification.
Okay, good. Building a little bit on the previous question, it's about rules and regulations. Should we have more? Should we have less? And we always end up saying, no, we should have better rules.
No,
It's not about more or less, it's about better. And in my humble view, better is, we get better with that. You talked about dialogue and things like that. And perhaps we have seen too little of that. And in some other countries where I have experience from, it was a lot of that. The industries all the time invited to workshops, throwing their opinions and so on. And my feeling within the European Union is that could be improved, and by using that we could perhaps making it better. And you indicated that you see this is happening. Could you elaborate a little bit, because this gives me hope if we can make it better together. So.
It's important to have more opportunities for discussion. If we consider EU, so for EU, even some researchers mentioned that the best option for discussion with European Commission of topics is associations like Hydrogen Europe and others. And through this association, it's possible also to be involved in some working groups and some discussions, some projects. And European Commission creates also some initiatives like renewable low carbon fuels alliance and others. At the national level in Germany, we have also different associations, but different also working groups for different topics like sustainable aviation fuel and others. I understand that sometimes maybe it's not enough. Sometimes they discuss topics that are not relevant for certain projects. But still, I believe that it's possible to raise your questions in your company, for instance, in order to discuss topics that are important for you, for instance, in some events, in some other activities with policymakers. So in any case, it is important to raise these questions and to discussion and for some results.
And Marina, I'm hearing a lot, we've spoken a lot about RFMBOs and renewable hydrogen.
Hashtag
RFMBOs. I want to move a little bit to low carbon hydrogen. At this conference, and actually I just returned from Texas, and I've been hearing a lot of words like pragmatism, realism. And for me, when I hear those words, I think that they are really speaking about moving towards diversifying the types of hydrogen that are used. I like to say hydrogen doesn't know what color it is. And are we trying to if we're trying to create a hydrogen market, in your opinion, or from what you're seeing, do you think that we need to create more space for low carbon hydrogen in the EU? And I'd be interested to also know your views about that, if you're seeing any type of evolution in the EU and the US.
Yeah, it's a good question about low carbon hydrogen. So I think we have certain changes in this year with Clean Industrial Deal. First of all, it was mentioning about low carbon hydrogen and Clean Industrial Deal together with renewable hydrogen. And the latest terms and conditions of Hydrogen Bank that was published for discussion included also electrolytic low carbon hydrogen. That means that European Commission decided to support also this kind of hydrogen. And also state aid rules framework for Clean Industrial Deal includes some rules if low carbon hydrogen complies with emissions threshold. So it means that we have some changes in this field. However, still, this low carbon hydrogen should be produced from climate neutral grid.
I'm thinking in an ideal world, isn't it just to have a certificate about the carbon footprint and be completely neutral when it comes to how it's produced, and just because the whole thing here is about decarbonization. Aren't we just making it unnecessarily complicated? And isn't that where we should go? And if you believe in that, are we on a journey towards just that simple certificate?
It's also a good question because we have two types of certificates. A simple type, it's a guarantees of origin. Just confirmation that hydrogen produced from renewable electricity and only for hydrogen as gas. In this case, we can use book and claim, and it's quite simple, it seems to me, in comparison with RFMBO. For renewable fuel and biological origin, indeed, it's very complicated for projects in order to comply with all requirements. However, the main purpose of the certificate is greenhouse gas emissions reduction. And I believe that it's the only way, maybe, because this certificate is based on the life cycle assessment of the product. So take into account the standards for life cycle assessment. I think it's the best way, maybe, to confirm decrease of emissions.
Marina, to then go from certification and we were already moving away from RFMBO. Just to very simplistic metrics, I suggest we start creating something like a Marina index of how well the weather is in Copenhagen doing versus if you compare the same to how do you think is the energy, the buzz, the will to do deals and move the renewable and low carbon hydrogen sector further globally here in Copenhagen is. So if I'm looking today out the window here in Copenhagen, it's blue sky, a lot of happy Copenhagen people on the bicycles on the way here, slightly coldish, but so if you're coming from Spain or I don't know.
But the sunshine.
The sunshine is there. It makes a lot of people smile, right? So if we are kind of then rating it on a scale of 1 to 10, and 1 is like a hurricane and a storm and cold, and 10 is like this Maldives kind of weather, right? I would give Copenhagen today actually a 9 for, what Copenhagen could do, right? So if we then go to this conference, you kind of have to give it a weather number. What number would you give it on a scale of 1 to 10?
I maybe would give 8 because I think a lot of participants are here, especially in the different panel discussions. So, for instance, yesterday I attended the panel with Jackie, and I was surprised that a lot of people was involved in the discussions and participated. It means a lot of interest in development of hydrogen sector. I noticed a lot of producers, as I mentioned, in clean tech. It's also a good sign. Why 8? Because I think that we have a lot of possibilities for development, and I hope that in several years we will have large exhibitions. And my dream is exhibitions like Wind Europe with a lot of participants of this sector in the future.
Thank you. And I know I asked this question earlier, but I'm not going to let you run away from it because Marina and I actually worked together a little bit on some US hydrogen things. And I'd love to hear, we've heard a lot of, we're here at a European conference, but of course we've heard a lot of some US buzz. And I've heard differing things here. Some people are very optimistic about the US market, perhaps from the low carbon side, and I would like to know why. Some people are less optimistic about the US market. We've seen some news come out about funding cuts to hydrogen hubs. Some speculative news, perhaps that it might be all of the hubs. We're not completely sure yet. And of course, you're speaking about the feeling and the spirit in Europe and at this conference, which makes me a bit optimistic because you're saying people are wanting to buy, deals are perhaps happening. But in the US, what is your sentiment? What do you think is the overarching position from a regulatory perspective? What are the pushes? Where are the winds going?
Yeah, that's an interesting question for me also. I just noticed that if we consider amendments in the IRA, the main amendments were connected with renewable hydrogen, clean hydrogen, I mean. However, about low carbon hydrogen, it's still some supporting place, if I'm not mistaken. So it seems to me it's a similar approach as in the EU. Also, we try to combine perform our decarbonization target using renewable hydrogen, but also consider low carbon hydrogen. However, about yes, it's difficult to say something for the future because we had a lot of changes.
Yeah. I agree that there's a lot of uncertainty, and perhaps that uncertainty is as a result, I like to say that politics can be a tailwind or a crosswind when it comes to energy policy. And I think hydrogen's a great example of that because we see the effect of policy and politics on a new technology, Joachim, being low carbon and renewable forms of hydrogen. I see we're running out of some time. But I do just want to perhaps ask you where you think the future of hydrogen is going. When I look at the trajectory, you say you started in 2020. I remember in 2020, people talking about the Swiss Army knife, hydrogen being used for everything. Then we got Repower EU, sort of a line in the sand, hydrogen not just being a decarbonization tool, but also becoming a sort of security of supply tool, something that you hinted at as well. And then we see recently as well, the conversation shifting from sort of decarbonization, security of supply. Lately, when I hear hydrogen, I hear it in the same sentence as competitiveness. So I've seen this sort of evolution in the rhetoric around hydrogen. It's also, its end uses seem to also have diminished. Not that the idea of hydrogen has diminished, but its use cases have diminished. If we were going to have this podcast in 5 years, what do you think would be the future of hydrogen? Where would we be? How would we be talking about hydrogen, renewable and low carbon?
I think we will talk about hydrogen together with other technologies. So I think you're right that we started from pure hydrogen in 2020. And then we found a lot of new technologies, Power-to-X and others. And now we have additionally CCU, CCS, additional hydrogen. I guess it's important to analyze this topic in the history together with all topics in the energy sector. It's everything connected.
Okay, so you're really looking at it from that European perspective of system integration. Hydrogen is just one technology. In 5 years, we won't be speaking about hydrogen alone. This will be a discussion. We'll be speaking about the energy system.
Yes, I think energy system is a main topic in any case. And everything depends from technical development of different technologies.
Marina, Trump administration likes to speak of energy dominance, like US, selling energy in all forms. Includes, by the way, deals about low carbon hydrogen. I actually also think in Europe we can be energy dominant. All we need to do is just put energy. Well, we have a lot of funding actually. We're not very efficient in putting it, but we do have multi-billions, and well, depends how you account for it. Perhaps even trillions of funding. And we showed that when, for example, COVID recovery funding happened. We didn't always knew how to spend it, even, Court of Auditors showed it, but we have funding. So imagine we put it in several energy vectors. If you think about it, we want to be an energy dominant Europe where we basically import almost nothing except perhaps out of friendship, just to do business, but not for the sake of the fact that we really need it. So, and you have to define a top 3 of energy vectors. Now, with everything that we know, would you still say that hydrogen should be in that top 3? Or, should it be just natural gas, CCUS, nuclear, and renewables? So, I'm kind of thinking, some people think probably, not in the top 3. But would you say would there be a reason for hydrogen to be there in the top 3 for energy dominant Europe? And if so, what would it be?
I think it could be assumption renewables, solar, wind, hydrogen, because we need to store renewable energy. Nuclear maybe in some countries like France, Finland, Sweden, because for balancing renewables, it's still we need clean energy. And in nuclear, I understand the risks connected with it, but still it's a climate neutral. So I think it's 3 main, because with nuclear we have some new technologies for development, like small reactors. So maybe it will be one of the options. However, Germany refused from this, and maybe we will find in Germany some other options for decarbonization, like hydrogen power plants in the future. But still, everything together with renewables energy projects.
So it's a supporting vector, so to say.
I could speak for hours on this topic, but I think that we always have a segment at the end of our show where first I ask my co-hosts and then I'll ask you, if you are speaking around the coffee cart, which we will be in just 15 minutes in a room full of hydrogen experts and people interested in hydrogen. So more realistic question. If you were speaking around the coffee cart about this conversation and about hydrogen generally, what would be your key takeaways?
If I had to start, Marina put me thinking that indeed there is probably a very complex and difficult trade-off. Like, do you want to import cheaper energy and hence just give up on your cautiously designed regulation, which would be basically, an example we discussed, more Indian power-to-X products in an easier way? Or do we think that we want to push our economy towards more energy sovereignty, be strict about just, this is the way we produce hydrogen and power-to-X here, which implicitly will mean more no to products from countries like India and more local, but that will have a cost, right? And that trade-off is something I would like to consider at the coffee machines.
I think, Marina, that you got me a little bit more optimistic.
Yeah.
I think that the EU has been throwing a lot of money on a lot of things and not much happens. But you talk about the pragmatism, a reformation, if you like. So it's good to have EU, but we have to have a pragmatic EU when it comes to this kind of thing and all other things as well. And maybe it should stop drifting in certain directions and come back to where it's useful for. And that goes for regulations, the dialogue, working together. So that it gave me hope. So that's a takeaway. So I will go to that coffee gathering with a big positive smile and say, Marina, she was not only we have a sunny day here in Copenhagen, but this made it further.
Thank you very much for discussion. I like discussion these topics. Yes, I'm trying to be optimistic in any case. And just basically my previous experience with renewable energy, I had also had time with renewables in Ukraine when we had cut off of green tariffs. And at the end, I won all courts and received court decisions for payment. So for this reason, based on my previous experience, I believe that it is possible to find a solution even for some such complex topics like hydrogen.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Marina. I think you gave us the name of this podcast episode, From Hype to Hope.
Yeah.
Very good, very good.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you all for joining us. Join us a bit later in about a few hours where we'll be speaking to Jessica from InnoCell.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
See you all. Bye.